I'm not proud of the moment I hit the floor. People love to romanticize collapse, like it's some dramatic, slow-motion scene where you see it coming. I didn't. 1 second I was staring at the glowing spreadsheet my boss dumped on my desk at 6:42 p.m., and the next my world folded inward like someone yanked the plug out of me. And the worst part? I wasn't even surprised. My body quit long after my mind had already begged for mercy. My boss used to say that 4,500 a month is good money every time someone hinted at burnout. He would lean back in his leather chair, lace his fingers, and smile like he had gifted us the moon. Plenty of people would kill for what you guys have, he'd say, so let's stay grateful. Grateful? For 12-hour shifts, for weekend calls, for running a department that technically had 3 people, except 2 had quit, and he decided I had potential and should step up. I was the kind of idiot who thought stepping up meant proving something. To him, to myself, to the ghosts of every adult who'd told me to work hard and keep your head down. I told myself it was temporary. I told myself it was an opportunity. I told myself a lot of things you only say when you're too tired to admit the truth. The week it happened, I worked 9 days straight, no days off. 2 emergency shifts. 3 deadlines magically moved forward because the client changed their mind. My boss kept calling all of it character building. I kept calling it fine. That was the lie I hid behind. I'm fine. I wasn't. I think everyone around me knew before I did. The day I collapsed, I arrived at 7:12 a.m. with a travel mug of coffee and a headache behind my eyes that felt stitched into my skull. The office was freezing. Our AC ran like it was trying to preserve meat. My hands shook so badly I typed everything twice. By noon, I'd already skipped lunch, again because the project needed me, and he kept walking past my desk reminding me of it. He had a talent for making his voice feel like a leash. Around 3 p.m., the buzzing in my ears turned into a low hum that drowned out everything else. I stood up to print something, walked 2 steps, and the floor tilted like the building had shifted. I remember someone saying my name, or maybe it was just the echo in my skull. Then darkness, not peaceful, not quiet, just gone. When I opened my eyes, I was on the break room floor with 2 coworkers kneeling beside me. One held my wrist, another kept saying, "Dude, stay with us." Someone had called an ambulance. My face burned with humiliation more than pain. My boss stood in the doorway watching, not worried, not horrified, just annoyed, like I'd spilled something he'd have to step over. On the ride to the hospital, the EMT asked me when I'd last slept a full night. I didn't have an answer. He didn't say it out loud, but the look he gave me said enough. How did you let it get this bad? Because people like me do. Because we're trained to. Because the world praises you for killing yourself until you actually start dying. At the hospital, the doctor told me I was severely dehydrated, exhausted, and running on adrenaline and caffeine. A combination that can and will drop you again if you don't slow down. Slow down. Another thing I wasn't allowed to do. I spent 3 hours under observation, trying to steady my breathing while fluorescent lights hummed above me. My hands still shook, even after the IV. I kept thinking about work, deadlines, emails, messages I hadn't answered. My boss's face when he saw me fall. It didn't look like concern. It looked like I'd inconvenienced him. When they finally discharged me, I stepped outside into cold night air that hit my skin like a warning. My phone buzzed with a message from my boss, the man who watched me collapse like I'd just interrupted his afternoon. "Call me when you get this. We need to discuss what happened today." Not, "How are you?" Not, "Are you okay?" Just, "discuss." I stood there on the curb with a hospital wristband still on my arm and realized something I should have seen months earlier. I wasn't working a job. I was surviving an environment. But that was just the surface. The real problem, the one that would break everything open, was waiting for me the next morning, and I had no idea that what happened next would cost my boss far more than a missed deadline. When I returned to work the next morning, everyone expected me to take the day off. Everyone except the one person who actually controlled my schedule. I walked into the office, still wearing the plastic hospital band because I'd forgotten to take it off. And the first thing I saw was my boss standing outside his office with his arms crossed, waiting. Not worried, not relieved, just irritated, like I'd shown up late to a meeting I didn't know existed. "Come in," he said, turning without another word. I followed him into his office and sat across from his desk. He didn't offer water, didn't ask how I was. He opened a folder, slid a piece of paper toward me, and tapped the top line with his pen. "This is the incident report," he said. "I need you to sign that your collapse was due to personal health choices, not company workload." I stared at the paper. My vision blurred for a second, not from exhaustion, from something sharper. There it was, in black ink. Employee reports failing to eat properly and not maintaining adequate rest. No work-related cause identified. He didn't even bother to dress it up. "You're serious?" I asked. "I'm being generous," he replied. "If corporate hears that you fainted on the job because of stress, they'll investigate the whole department. And trust me, that won't end well for anyone." There it was, the threat cloaked as advice. He wasn't protecting me. He was protecting himself. "So sign it," he said, leaning back. "Let's move on." I didn't touch the pen. He sighed loudly, the kind of sigh people use to guilt you. "Look, you're a good worker, but yesterday you created a disruption. Ambulances in the lobby, employees leaving their desks. That reflects on all of us." A disruption. My body shutting down was an inconvenience to his image. "In the future," he continued, "if you feel unwell, tell someone before you create a scene." A scene? I almost laughed. I didn't choose to pass out. I didn't plan it between calendar reminders. "I didn't choose it," I said quietly. He waved that off like it was a minor detail. Whatever the case, it affected productivity. That word, productivity, felt like a knife. I remembered my coworkers kneeling next to me, calling my name, shaking my shoulder. Nothing about that moment was unproductive. It was human, something he'd long forgotten how to be. Then he said something that snapped whatever patience I had left. "For $4,500 a month, I expect reliability, not drama." Reliability. I'd been carrying his department on my back for months, and he still reduced me to a salary line. But that was just the beginning. He slid the report closer. "Sign. Then go back to your desk and catch up on yesterday's work." My hands were trembling again, but not from exhaustion this time. Something inside me, something I had kept quiet and obedient and small, finally stood up. "No," I said. He stopped moving. For a second he didn't even blink. "I'm sorry? I'm not signing a lie." His jaw tightened. "This isn't optional. HR needs the report by end of day. Then send it without my signature." His face darkened. "You're making a mistake." Maybe I was, but collapsing on a cold office floor had already shown me the cost of doing things his way. I wasn't doing it again. He leaned forward slowly, voice dropping into something colder. "You understand that refusing to cooperate puts your position at risk." "I understand," I said, "and I'm still not signing." He stared at me like he was waiting for me to crack. When I didn't, he grabbed the paper, shoved it back into the folder, and snapped it shut. "Fine, go. I'll handle it." But I knew he wouldn't drop it. Men like him don't let go of control. They double down. When I stepped out of his office, 2 coworkers watched me with wide eyes. One whispered, "Did he really try to blame you?" Another quietly said, "Good for you." They looked terrified, even saying that much. That told me everything. Something was wrong here, not just with my workload, with the system that allowed him to get away with it. I sat at my desk, still trembling, and opened my computer. Emails, deadlines, requests. The endless obligations he insisted made me reliable. But for the first time, they didn't feel like chains. They felt like evidence. I opened my timesheets, logged hours, screenshots of late-night messages, voicemails where he demanded I come in, calendar histories showing 9 straight days with no time off. The medical discharge note the ER nurse said I should keep for documentation. One coworker quietly slipped by and placed a sticky note on my desk. If you need someone to confirm what happened yesterday, I will. A tiny crack in the wall he'd built around our silence. That note felt like the first match in a pile of dry wood. By lunch, my boss had already emailed HR a different version of the report, one that conveniently left out the medical findings and spun the story into a temporary personal issue. He CC'd me like it was just routine paperwork. It wasn't routine. It was deliberate. I sat staring at the email, the plastic hospital band digging into my skin. My pulse pounded in my throat, not with fear this time, with clarity. For the first time in months, maybe years, something aligned inside me. I realized I wasn't powerless. I was informed, and informed people can cause earthquakes. That night, I would later tell someone, I stopped being the hero. I stopped trying to carry everything quietly. I stopped trying to fix a broken system by sacrificing myself to it. Something had shifted, and once it shifted, I couldn't shove it back into place. They thought I'd go back to work and keep my head down. They thought I'd swallow it like always. They thought my collapse was the worst thing that could happen. They were wrong, because I was done collapsing, and they had no idea what was coming next. I didn't sleep that night, not because of anxiety, the opposite. For the first time in months, my mind wasn't fogged or drowning. It was sharp, too sharp, like I'd finally stopped running and realized the ground beneath me wasn't solid at all, just a thin layer of ice stretched over something dark. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, the hospital wristband still on my arm, scrolling through months of messages I'd ignored, minimized, or explained away. Every need you to come in, every we can't afford delays, every be a team player, every midnight call, every forced weekend shift. I saw my own replies, short, apologetic, obedient. I hated how small they looked now. But the more I collected, the more undeniable everything became. The screenshots weren't scattered events. They were a pattern, a system, a trap disguised as loyalty. By morning, I had a folder labeled Work Proof, so full it looked like I'd been preparing for this moment without knowing it. Still, I wasn't sure what to do. Not fully. Not until I walked into the office. The atmosphere felt different the moment I stepped inside. People were whispering near the coffee machine, glancing at me, and then quickly looking away. One coworker offered a sympathetic smile, the kind people give when they expect someone to break. I wasn't breaking. I was taking inventory. My boss called me into his office before I even managed to sit down. Same crossed arms. Same irritation simmering under every word. "We need to talk about your attitude yesterday," he said. I almost laughed. My attitude. "You refused to sign documentation. You challenged a direct request. That's insubordinate." Insubordinate. A word bosses use when their power feels threatened. He kept talking, lecturing me about professionalism, reliability, being a team player. But his voice blurred behind the sharper thoughts forming in my mind. I watched his mouth move, watched him rehearse a speech he probably delivered to every employee he'd burned out before me. He had no idea the ground beneath him was already cracking. When he finally paused for breath, I asked, "Is that all?" His eyebrows shot up. "No. I'm assigning your overdue tasks to 2 other team members. Your collapse put us behind schedule." "My collapse?" I echoed. He didn't react. He just kept going, laying out new expectations, new rules, new demands, as if he hadn't watched me hit the floor, as if I was an appliance that malfunctioned. Then he ended with the same smug line he'd used before. "Look, $4,500 is good money. Most people would thank me for the opportunities you're getting here." That was the moment something clicked. Loudly. I realized he actually believed that. He believed exhaustion was a privilege. He believed being owned was gratitude. They thought I was done. I wasn't. When I left his office, I walked past my coworkers, people who looked weighed down by the same invisible chains. One of them, Dana, stood up and caught my sleeve as I passed. Her voice was barely a whisper. He asked me yesterday if you were emotionally unstable. I told him what I saw. You passed out. You weren't dramatic. You were unconscious. She swallowed hard. He didn't like that answer. Something inside me solidified. I returned to my desk and started printing. Emails, timesheets, shift logs, the medical papers the ER doctor signed. For once, the printer's grinding noise didn't frustrate me. It fueled me. By noon, I had everything sorted into a single neat stack. At 1:17 p.m., I sent it all to an outside labor attorney a friend recommended years ago. I never thought I'd need it. Turns out my past self was smarter than I gave him credit for. At 1:23 p.m., the attorney responded, "This is substantial. Do not sign anything further. I'll begin the process. Expect contact soon, and keep documenting." The rush of relief that hit me was physical, but that was just the beginning. 3 days later, while my boss was in the middle of bragging loudly about team efficiency, 2 men in suits walked into the office asking for him by name. The room went dead silent. Even the typing stopped. HR tried to intercept them. They failed. The men flashed badges, official, unmistakable, and asked my boss to join them in a conference room. He tried to laugh it off on the walk over. Probably just procedural, happens all the time. It didn't happen all the time. It didn't happen ever. The next 2 hours were the longest in recent memory. People kept glancing toward the closed conference room door. Someone whispered that they saw one of the agents carrying a folder with my boss's name on it. Someone else said they overheard the words, "workplace safety." I kept my head down, but inside there was something like calm fire. And then, the moment. Around 3:40 p.m., the conference room door opened. My boss stepped out looking pale, furious, and smaller than I had ever seen him. HR followed behind him, flustered. The 2 men collected their documents and left without a word. My boss stormed past my desk without looking at me, but his hands were shaking. "They'll interview staff tomorrow," someone whispered. "Everyone who saw you collapse." Everyone? That meant Dana? That meant the guy who held my wrist. That meant the entire room of witnesses he pretended didn't exist. That night, I didn't go home crushed or afraid. I went home steady. For the first time, the balance of power had shifted, even if only by an inch. And an inch was all I needed, because once the truth starts breaking through, it never stops. And I wasn't finished. Not even close. The next morning felt unreal. The office, usually buzzing with forced cheer and passive-aggressive good mornings, was quiet in a way that didn't feel accidental. People were sitting straighter, clicking softer, watching doors instead of screens. You could feel it, the silence that means something's gone wrong. Around 9:15 a.m., HR began calling people one by one into a small conference room. Staff who'd never been asked anything more than, "How's your weekend?" were suddenly being interviewed with clipboards and formal language. Donna went in first. When she came out, her face was pale but determined. "They asked everything," she whispered to me. "The hours, the workload, the way he pressured you, the day you collapsed, and they asked if this was a pattern." She didn't say the rest out loud, but I knew. It was a pattern. It had been for years. By noon, 5 more people had spoken to the investigators. By 2, HR looked like they were holding on by threads. For the first time, the entire structure of the place, all the fear, all the pressure, felt exposed. My boss, meanwhile, kept pacing in and out of his office, pretending he was handling things, but the crack in him was visible. The man who once strutted through the department like he owned everyone's lungs now looked like he couldn't get enough air. He didn't call me into his office. He didn't speak to me at all. He walked around me like I was a lit fuse. By late afternoon, he was summoned again, this time by his own superiors. 2 people from corporate arrived unannounced, wearing the kind of expressions that suggested this was no longer about productivity, efficiency, or Good money? This was liability now. Real liability. At 4:52 p.m., the hallway erupted with whispers. Someone said, "He's out." Someone else said, "No way." Another whispered, "I saw them take his badge." Then the door opened. My boss walked out carrying a box, a cardboard box. The cliché of clichés. Inside were his desk trinkets, a paperweight shaped like a globe, a couple of awards he'd repeatedly reminded us he won, a photo frame with no photo in it. He didn't look at me, not once, but his jaw clenched when he passed my desk, and for a split second our eyes met. It wasn't anger, it wasn't hatred, it was recognition. He finally understood I hadn't been the weak one in the story. As he pushed through the door and left the building, someone muttered under their breath, "Guess $4,500 wasn't enough after all." By 5 p.m., HR sent out an email. Effective immediately, the department is undergoing structural leadership changes. Further details will follow. Structural leadership changes. Corporate language for the man who pretended he owned us didn't even own his job. When I stepped outside, the sky felt different. Not because the world had changed, but because I finally had enough breath to feel it. That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I didn't post anything online or crack a smile in the mirror. I sat at my kitchen table, drank a glass of water, and let the quiet settle around me. A quiet I hadn't earned by collapsing, but by standing. 2 days later, the attorney called, not with another warning, not with another request for documents, with news. "I've spoken with the company's legal department," he said. "They're willing to settle quietly. And there's something else you should know. A rival firm reached out. They're impressed with your portfolio and the way you handled all this. They want to meet." I didn't say anything for a moment, just breathed in. Breathed out. The simplest act, finally easy. The interview happened the next week. The offer came an hour later. A salary higher than anything I'd imagined. Normal hours. Real boundaries. Actual respect. No good money speech. No manipulation disguised as gratitude. Just work and the space to live around it. On my first day at the new job, I arrived early, not because I was afraid, but because I wanted to. The office was bright, quiet, and human. A manager walked up, shook my hand, and said, "If anything ever feels off, tell me. We don't burn people out here." Simple words, but they hit harder than any collapse. After work, I stopped by a cafe near the parking lot, ordered a coffee the way I like it, sat by the window and watched people walking by. People living, not surviving. I took off the last remnant of my old life, the worn-out lanyard from my previous job I'd been carrying out of habit, and dropped it into the trash. No ceremony, just gravity. A quiet ending for a loud chapter. They thought I was gone. I wasn't. I had simply stopped carrying a world that never cared if it crushed me. Now I carry only what's mine. My work, my time, my breath, and a life that actually fits. And for the first time in a long time, that's enough.